Hey everybody, it's Renee. Today we're going to read James chapter 5, verse 18. It says, "Then he prayed again, he being Elijah, and heaven gave rain and the earth bore its fruit." Two words carry the whole weight of this verse. Again and again. Elijah had already prayed the sky shut. He had already stood before the king, called down fire, outlasted 450 prophets, and watched Israel fall on its face before God. By any reasonable measure, he had done enough. He had prayed enough. He had believed enough. And then James tells us he got back on his knees and prayed again. The single word, again, may be the most important thing James says about prayer in this entire letter. The scene in 1 Kings 18 is one of the most vivid in all of Scripture. Elijah is on Mount Carmel, face between his knees, pressing into God for the rain he knows is coming. He sends his servant to look toward the sea. The servant returns. Nothing. Elijah prays again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. 6 times the servant comes back empty, and 6 times Elijah refuses to adjust his expectation downward or conclude that he has misunderstood God. On the 7th trip, the servant sees it. A cloud the size of a man's fist rising from the Mediterranean, small enough to dismiss. But Elijah does not dismiss it. He sends word to Ahab immediately, "Get your chariot ready before the rain stops you." Before the cloud has finished forming, Elijah is already acting on the answer. This is the sequence James wants us to see. Not the fire from heaven, impressive as it was. Not the confrontation with the prophets of Baal. The quiet, stubborn, unspectacular act of praying the same prayer 7 times while the horizon stayed empty and refusing to stop. It is worth being clear about what Elijah was not doing on that hillside. He was not trying to wear God down. He was not repeating himself in the hope that volume or frequency would eventually overcome divine reluctance. He was not operating on the assumption that God needed convincing. Elijah had already heard from God. He knew the rain was coming. 1 Kings 18:1 records God telling him directly that he was about to send it. The prayer was not an attempt to change God's mind. It was the act of a man positioning himself again and again in alignment with what God had already said he would do. This is what persistent prayer looks like at its best. Not the frantic repetition of someone trying to get God's attention, but the settled, returning faithfulness of someone who has heard the promise and refuses to let go of it while they wait for the fulfillment. The 7 prayers were not 7 attempts. They were one sustained act of faith across 7 intervals of waiting. James is precise in how he describes the outcome. The sky gave rain. The Greek word here suggests generosity, abundance, the kind of giving that holds nothing back. After 3.5 years of drought, the release was not measured or cautious. The heavens opened with everything they had been holding, 3.5 years worth, and the earth produced its fruit. The same word used for something sprouting, pushing upward through the soil, alive with the urgency of growth too long delayed. What famine had slowly stripped away, the rain began to restore almost immediately. The land remembered what it was made to do. Both verbs are worth sitting with when you are in a season of waiting. The God who answers does not answer sparingly. When the answer comes, it tends to carry the weight of everything that was held in reserve during the silence. The drought was not evidence that God had forgotten. It was the condition that made the abundance undeniable. This is a pattern in this story that James understands better than we usually do. 6 times, nothing. 7th time, a cloud the size of a fist. And Elijah runs. The nothing was not failure. It was not a sign that the prayer was wrong or the faith was insufficient. It was the sequence, the specific necessary sequence that preceded the answer. Elijah did not know it would take 7. He simply knew that God had spoken, and so he kept praying until the promise arrived. We tend to treat unanswered prayer as evidence against continuing. James treats it as the condition of continuing. The servant's empty report is not a denial. It is a count, and you do not know when you are on prayer 4 or prayer 6 that the answer is one more away. What you know is what Elijah knew. God said it, pray it again. James is not letting this stay in 1 Kings. He is dragging Carmel into the specific geography of your life. The marriage has been struggling for years, a child who has not come home, a situation at work that has not moved, maybe a health report that's not changed, the dream that has been waiting so long it has started to feel foolish. Your persistent prayer is not bothering God. It is not a sign of weak faith that cannot simply trust and release. It is the language of a son or daughter who knows their father well enough to keep coming back, to keep asking, to keep scanning the horizon with the expectation the cloud is forming even when the sea looks empty. The drought was real. 3.5 years is a long time, but it had a last day, and that last day looked exactly like every other day until the fist-sized cloud appeared. Pray again, not because God has not heard, because the cloud is forming and you do not know which prayer is the 7th. What prayer have you quietly stopped praying? Not because you stopped believing, but because the repetition began to feel futile. Bring it back before God today. Name it again. The count is still running. Where have you been interpreting the silence as a no when it may seem simply be a not yet? Ask God for the grace to continue in faith without revising the promise to fit the delay. Think about this today. See you later.